All right, well, I'd like to begin with acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands that we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and acknowledge that these lands that we're living and working on have always been places of learning, teaching and research. And we love Tea and Buns because it's just a chance to learn from each other, to have a yarn, think about our lives as individuals, but as workers and colleagues and community members. And Tea and Buns is all about that, just allowing us to have a chat with each other and have a chat with different people each month. Right, well, this month we are talking about uncertainty, and I just wanted to kick off with something that's really helped me over the last couple of months. And it's something called a circle of control, and sometimes it's called a circle of influence. So I want you to get a pen and paper, and I want you to do 3 circles, okay, a bit like this, okay? Do a circle in the middle. You can sort of do a circle in the middle. I am going to put a handout in the chat in a moment. Can you see how you can do 3 circles, okay? I'm going to put this handout in a second up there for you. And you can just draw 3 circles. And in the first circle, in the middle circle, it's the circle of control. So that's what you can control. In fact, there's a little, yes, actually on my slide, there's a little diagram for you to help you. So in the first circle is the little circle of control. The second circle is what you can influence. So it's not what you can control, but it's maybe what you can influence. And then the third circle is your circle of concern, or what you can't control. So you can actually write, I can't control this. That's the circle of concern. I can't control that. Now, I've just put some things on the screen right here, and I just want you to take 1 or 2 or 3, just the first that grab your attention. Which circle would you put them in? So let's pick one. Going for a walk. Is that something you can control, you can influence, or something you can't control? Which circle would you put that in? Who's gonna help me out here? Just
control. I'll pop in control.
Yes.
Yep.
Sarah, which would you put that in?
I'd put that in control because that's an action I can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. Okay. What about the weather? Is that something we can control, influence, or not control?
That would be a concern.
Yeah, it's not really, yeah, it's kind of far out of our control. And so that isn't something we can't worry about, or we don't have to worry about, because it's not within our control. We might be able to make a plan B if we were going for a walk and we wanted it to be sunny, but it's rainy. Then we could take control about how we dealt with that situation. And Heather's already said, yeah, we can control maybe the attitude, or we can control certain attributes or activities around that. And so there will be other things in there that will either fit within your circle of control or your circle that you can't control. And I wanted to just share this with you as an activity that you can do individually or with your team, because it's really helped me over the last couple of months. And I've been doing this with my kids as well. And really talking each day about, well, what could we control today? What's within our control that we can really start to focus on? Because if we're always focused on what we can't control, it really can have a negative effect on our mental health, because we start to worry a lot about things that we can't influence or we can't control. The interesting thing about that middle circle, the influence circle, is that Stephen Covey, who he actually talks about the circle of influence, he says that actually if you focus on the things that you can control a lot more, your circle of influence expands. By and have a look at what he talks about in terms of that. Whereas, you know, if you're always focused on what you can't control, your circle of influence actually diminishes. It goes smaller. So if we focus on what we can control, he actually says, I wrote this down. I love what he says. he says your energy is going to be more positive, enlarging, and magnifying. I love that. So your energy is really much more positive and magnifying if you're focused on what you can control. So I hope you like that as just a little way of introducing today's session, because when we're talking about uncertainty, and Mark is going to share his story now, I'm sure we're going to talk about this in terms of what can we control, and does that have any influence on the way that we think about uncertainty and the worries that we are totally sometimes valid, okay? We're not diminishing people's concerns at all. And I want to also just say, you know, if this session brings up anything for you, please seek help and support. There are many, many people out there that want to support you. So if you do get triggered at all for your own mental health, please get some support. But this is about really just caring and supporting for each other whilst we talk about things that do trigger those things that that worry us and really sometimes don't help us, you know, diminish our positivity. All right. So I hope that was does anyone use that already? Or have I introduced you to something
Ruth, can I pitch in already? Sorry. Without knowing it, I used that framework in hospital. So the first thing that went through my mind was I wanted to fully recover. And I knew I couldn't control that. But what I could control was the energy and the attitude I brought to that process. And so I tried so hard to focus on that attitude and energy in order to achieve or have the most influence I possibly could on my ability to recover as well as possible.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's talk about that, because I want to introduce Mark. And I met Mark when he came and spoke at a QUT event. And the reason why I went to listen to Mark initially was because I have my own story about my dad, who had a very serious accident when he was young and I was young. And I was very curious to hear Mark and listen to his story about how he dealt with a serious accident. So that was how I kind of just met Mark. And then listening to his story, I thought, wow, he has some really great insights about how to deal with something that wasn't expected, that came out of the blue, but then really he had to go through this road to recovery. And so, Mark, welcome today. Thank you for coming along to the Team Buns community and sharing your story with us. I've put on the screen some photos, and I wondered if you'd just kick off with telling us the context of what your story is all about. What happened to you, Mark? You were living a really lovely life. You had a great corporate life and career. You had a family. Everything seemed to be going a bit smoothly for you until this accident. What happened?
Yeah. So firstly, thank you everyone for the time investment to come along and listen, and Ruth in particular, really feel blessed to have the opportunity to talk here, as I did that you took the effort to drive up to see me talk at QUT, driving up the highway. So really, really grateful for everyone investing time. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I guess my message around that too is I'd like us as a society to find a way to respect the land and the sustaining of the land in the same way as the traditional owners always have. I think that's a really important thing for Australia and the world. So 10th of March 2019, I had a really massive work week. I was working on a project for Salt Lake City. I'd had a couple of weeks there, 4 weeks before. And so we're, because of the round the clock time zone, preparing for a second workshop, working really hard, feeling pretty tired on a Saturday night. I'm thinking, will I bunk out of cycling? No, I'll go cycling with my mates as normal. I probably would ride 200 odd Ks, 250 Ks a week. Sundays typically something between a 60 and 90 K ride. And just failed to make a corner basically down in Fig Tree Pocket. So coming downhill at 40 K an hour, braked into the corner, could see the other guys going through in front of me, and somehow the bike's just understeered through the corner, hit some sort of soft bitumen amongst the other roadworks. So I lost my balance on the bike. I guess you're processing things really quickly, regaining regaining balance, but I knew I was going to crash, decided to make a controlled crash decision. What I didn't know was, what often happens on these downhill roads is you have a stormwater drain, and I found it where I was controlled crashing into. So I've flown off over the handlebars, which I knew I was doing when I was controlled. And I've clipped that bluestone wall, I think, with my helmet. So I did a pretty good job of hurting the helmet. My left hand hit it as well. So the only cuts on my whole body were a few little cuts on my fingers. But obviously I've hit the ground pretty hard. You can see on the second photo that later that day they stabilised my spine. So those rods are 23 centimetres long, and each of those screws are like 5.5 millimetres and 50 mil deep. So pretty significant piece of metalwork I carried around for a year, and that supported my ability to recover, because basically your spine would contract without that. One of my vertebrae was 40% of its original height. Another one was reduced by 10 or something, and 12 millimetre piece went into my spinal cord. So within millimetres of never walking again. So then I had that, I guess that, good news of being able to get up and, not that day, but eventually get up and work through a recovery, which a lot of people in a similar position wouldn't have. And I feel, I guess, enormously blessed for that. And that gives me the chance to speak to people about that sort of journey.
Yeah, so really from the moment that accident happened, you were suddenly thrown into this world of uncertainty, weren't you? I mean, I've read a little bit of your forthcoming book that you're writing, and I read how you were lying there, on the path there, not knowing what was going on in terms of, what is my injury? What does this look like for me? And you were still expecting to go, you were still lying there thinking you were going to go back to work in the afternoon. You were flying out somewhere, weren't you? You thought you were going to make the plane.
That might be a little bit kind. I was flying to Salt Lake City again that night. So that's part of why I pushed myself to go out and cycle, because I sleep better on the plane after exercise, etc. And I needed to be at my best. Well, I wanted to be at my best needed to be. That's a strong word, right? This is exactly the sort of stuff we're talking about, these self-expectations. I would have liked to have been at my best for that workshop. And part of that was sleeping well on the long haul flights. So I was keen to push myself hard on the ride, and I was due to fly at 9:30 that night. I just basically couldn't breathe. So when you smash your spine, and I had 3 fractured ribs as well, fractured left scap, fractured left wrist, but I don't think I could feel any pain apart from my back. And I just basically couldn't breathe. Both the shock and all your core muscles are basically frozen to protect yourself. And so it was really hard for me to sort of calm myself and control breathing. So I knew I was in a fair bit of trouble. I was pretty confident I wasn't flying that night. One of the other guys did say it might be muscular, you never know, Barrow, when I said, I'm not going anywhere tonight. He was a physio, so I was sort of half, you never know whether people are just trying to cheer you up a bit or actually there's some merit in it. But I took it on its word. And I started to process and thinking, maybe there's some way I could get out of hospital there's no flight Monday, so that's right. I can't get there on the Monday flight anyway, so I don't need to worry about that. Maybe there's some way I can get out of hospital late Monday or Tuesday morning and still be on the Tuesday flight via Sydney and get there, and I'll only miss the first few hours of the workshop. So I think that actually helped me to try and, in that moment, distract myself from the pain. I needed something to process and think. I was very much in my own little zone, I think. I just was sort of hanging on. And, I don't think, in some ways, I think the uncertainty wasn't too bad in the ditch. I knew it was bad, but I never thought it was anything like that. And I think part of that was because it was 5 weeks until I actually had any idea how I'd done the accident. And it seems so stupid now, but clearly I crushed my back when my head's pile drived into the ground, which was the first blow. But the pain hit me as I hit the ground really hard on my falling into that sort of safety position as you can see me. And so I guess I always associated doing some sort of disc damage or something in the back at that point in time. And so I always had that thought really strongly. And it wasn't until I actually started to chase a bit of certainty on how the injury had sort of impacted me, which wasn't until 4 or 5 weeks later. And we can talk about why I use that as a strategy as we go through. But I think that meant that I just didn't have a clue how I'd done it. But crash factored it down, and so I guess I was probably expecting it was serious, but I obviously never expecting to hear the words spinal cord injury and crushed vertebrae.
I want to move on to some questions now, because your story is really quite powerful, and I know that we can all gain some learnings from you, some wisdom from you, because this experience has taught you a lot about dealing with uncertainty. And your book is going to cover that a lot, about how you've dealt with uncertainty. So I've put some questions that I think I'd like to ask you about. And of course, anybody online today can ask questions. Please feel free to just unmute yourself or put a question in the chat. I'm going to try and watch and see if any questions come up. But I've kind of just sort of thought about your story and thought about what could we learn from you and what your experience has been, because I think we're all dealing with a lot of uncertainty. It might not be a major accident right now, but we are dealing with a pandemic. Lots of people are dealing with unemployment or not secure employment. We don't know whether we can see our friends again soon. Some of us, my family lives overseas. I just don't know when I'm going to be able to see them again. So we're all living in some form of uncertainty. And I'm pretty sure that your story will resonate with some of our own sort of thoughts about how can we live with this uncertainty at the moment, and so it doesn't really negatively affect our mental health. So Mark, let me ask you the first question that I've got for you then. You've had this accident, and people are telling you different things about, whether you're going to walk again, whether you're going to recover fully, whether you're going to lose your career, what if you're going to be a burden on your family from now, because I read that, that was one of your worries as well. So what were these triggers? What was making you feel so uncertain? And what was initially your strategy to deal with all of that uncertainty? And what could we learn from that?
Yeah. So I think that, to me, the absolute biggest first one was, when I got the diagnosis, and it's hard. I don't even know that you ever fully remember the prognosis when you get something that's so shocking. It's hard to digest. I know Lucy, my wife, she's got as much grace and fortitude as anyone I know, and she doesn't really recall much of that briefing at all, apart from sliding along a wall around the corner to another chair to sit down. For me, the words that I really, obviously a spinal cord injury devastated me, and this comment about 50% compression in your spinal cord. So basically that meant that the piece of vertebrae that had sort of fractured off and gone for a holiday had compacted the spinal cord area by so much that obviously it had done some damage. They didn't know how much. The only way forward was this operation. So a huge amount of uncertainty in that point in time. But I think the one that really hit me was that 50% compression in your spinal cord, because I know nothing about this medical stuff, and I'm sort of into that detail. And why would you? And I'm thinking, does that mean my legs are going to have 50% of the power that they had? How am I going to get around with 50% power? And I'm not even smart enough to know that 60% of my body weight's above my legs, or whatever the actual stat is. Even not thinking that you got more weight in your upper half of your body, I'm still thinking, how am I to get around with 50%, and will I be a burden to the family, and what's that going to mean, and all those things. You worked hard to be able to travel the world, and all the things I love doing, skiing. You're not. Where are they now in my life? Where's my life going? So massive amount of uncertainty in that first day. And I probably don't really remember the couple of hours between getting that diagnosis and when I seemed to come out of it. So sort of got that diagnosis probably around 10:37. And the next sort of thing that I can sort of strongly remember is about 1:45-ish. And I started texting the mates and basically trying to latch on to whatever I could find as positive. So the things were, what can I control? As we talked about before, attitude and effort. I sort of, I want an outcome. I want an outcome of full recovery or near to full recovery. So I'm targeting that, but I can't control that. What can I control? I can control the attitude and effort I bring to the process. I can control whether I'm a good role model for my children. I didn't really have any great aims beyond that, other than Lucy had been through cancer and done an amazing job through that. And I'm not going to be the person that doesn't set that example for, how to just have the right attitude and the right resolve to get through something. I think that was that determination, that sense of identity, latching on to what I call, your embers. So what are the things that really matter to you? I call it embers of normality. I actually don't like the word normality a lot, and new normals, all the rest of it, but embers of normality. So what are those parts of your identity you can really latch onto, and what can you build off? And for me, that became, okay, attitude and effort are a massive part of my embers and my important identity. How can I do it? So I dropped this text message to the boys, which really built off one of my embers, or my kids are giving me a hard time, of course, but, it's trying to be funny, trying to have a bit of humour, no matter how hard things are. So I sort of basically said to them, like, the operation will be later today. I've had to put it off until Lucy goes to Bunnings and gets the rods and pins. And, hopefully whilst the damage is severe, there's some hope of full recovery. So I had to paint that. And I think in part I put that message out there to try and convince myself that there was hope. So I guess I'm latching on two things to deal with that uncertainty, that what can I control, attitude and effort, and where do I have hope? How do I find a way to keep possibility out there? And so one other thing I think was really key was somewhere in that diagnosis, they've said, look, we just don't know at this stage, well, A, we don't know the operation will be successful, but it's your only hope. B, once we get through that, then it'll take some time, a lot of time, to work out how bad your damage is. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I guess I tried to extend that comment. Well, if the damage is, every spinal cord injury is unique, because they're saying, we can't really predict because of this variation, then every recovery can be unique. How can I find a way to build my own? I guess I wanted it to be an exceptional recovery. I couldn't really control that, but at least I could, bring my own unique effort to it and give it everything I had. And that was my key.
That's great, Mark. And I think what I'm hearing is that your triggers were things that were, is my life going to be the same again, or is it going to be different about my identity? So is this going to take something away from me, or is this going to change my identity? How are people going to respond to me? And it sounds like there were quite a few things that were triggering this uncertainty. And I'd love to hear in the chat what people think their triggers are. What is it that would actually make you feel uncertain? Is it that sense of control over your future, or is it that sense of identity, or that sense of knowledge? Because we're all very quick to go to Mr. Google, aren't we? As soon as we get something a little bit wrong or different, or something happens, we go, quick, what does that mean? What does that mean? And we're all, and of course we go to the news a lot to try and get some certainty about the future. In fact, I've got less and less wanting to look at the news, to be honest with you, because in our search for certainty, it actually can make you more worried. So I try to not listen to the news too much every morning, just quick headlines, but that's it. Because I think the more that we listen to people's perspectives on what they think is going to happen, what is happening, what isn't happening, that can actually make us feel more worried about the uncertainty of the future. So I'm very interested about what people's thoughts are on their own triggers, because I think there are many different triggers, and mindfulness and being aware of your triggers is perhaps one of the first steps. Donna might hopefully agree with me on that, is that being self-aware of your own triggers and knowing how to respond to those triggers is perhaps the first step. So thanks everybody for sharing that. When people are relying, when financially, when people are relying on you, or you think you've got to keep the money coming in to look after your family, that can be very uncertain if you're not sure your job is stable or what's going to happen in the community. So, Mark, thanks for sharing all that. And I really want to talk about then this sense of control and feeling out of control really and I'll use the word I did earlier, magnify, can magnify our sense of worriness and anxiousness and depression even, or it can actually, if we focus on what we can control, it can actually make us feel a bit more positive and in control. So what were some of the things that you started to rely on, your strategies, as you started, you heard now, you know, you've got a spinal cord injury, you've got a long road of recovery. What things can we learn from you in terms of what you were doing each day to deal with this situation where you were feeling out of control, but you were taking control every single maybe hour? Sometimes it would have felt like you would have just got through each hour.
Oh, it was very much like that. You know, the first week, very up and down emotionally. I was very fragile. Absolutely, you know. Different things would just trigger tears at different stages. I had an email exchange with Bicycle Queensland, the then CEO Anne Savage, just reaching out for help and saying what had happened and just the way she responded, etc. You know, I couldn't read the email fully the first time. I couldn't relate it to people because you're just so fragile. So you need good strategies, and I guess there are a number I think are very effective ones. So for me, you know, always good to have a good wingman, as your Top Gun would have taught you, for those that are of my era. I think, you know, Lucy was absolutely fantastic on a few really key areas where I needed support. And all my other friends, all of those people that triggered those embers and helped me reconnect to my sense of identity and realise that stuff was still there. I think that helped me get control. But I'll give two examples around Lucy. One, on the first morning, I basically couldn't really sort of deal with my phone. So Lucy had been sort of dealing with my phone and checking in with where, you know, with the guys, and then she hadn't told the kids what had happened. So she'd been at hospital with me for 3 or 4 hours. Basically left her note saying, you know, feed the dogs and hang out the washing and come see me in the hospital. And she's gone home to let our kids know the news, probably 11-ish or something. And she'd given me the phone. She said, "Don't Google your injuries." And I didn't really have any intent to do it that day, but I might have. And I think that was really, really important, because I think you start to chase this certainty that actually doesn't apply to you. It isn't relevant. And I saw some of the comments come up about misinformation and other things on the chat, and Ruth obviously said about it. So I think that's really key. And again, she was really key when it came to a couple of our, you know, choices of hospital change, because I had to go through 3 different hospitals through part of the rehab, and, you know, how we made those decisions. They're all really pretty complex. And so a good wingman definitely helps for that control. And I think we can always make sure we're helping each other and looking out for each other. Are You Okay is obviously a great example. But, you know, just in our relationships, how are we supporting each other through these things? That's definitely it. Focusing on what I could control, my attitude, my effort. And particularly in that first week, I guess the biggest thing I focused on was just don't go backwards. You're aiming for this slimmest hope. Do not, you know, keep moving. I don't care how much it hurts. Do what they tell you to do. I don't care how much you're scared of doing what the physio's asking you to do it. Just do it, because you're hanging on to this slim hope. So I think sometimes when you're feeling out of control, just finding a way to listen to, and you've got to trust somebody. You know, you can't just be questioning things. So how do I find the people I trust in the physios in particular I just connected to, and how do I just do what they tell me to do with all my might and focus on that, because I can control that. And I think that was probably my most effective strategy. Later on, there's a fair bit of reframing as well. So one of the examples I give now is I'm constantly reframing walking. So if we're walking somewhere as a family, I just can't keep up. You know, I can only walk half the speed I used to. And so I can't help myself. Always 2 thoughts go through my head. The first one is, I hate falling behind. The second one is, which is the reframe, I'm walking and I've still got some chance to improve. So that's the bit I can control. I can't control falling behind, but I can control remembering that that's why I want to keep putting effort in, and that's why I want to keep improving. So what can I control out of that trigger? So,
reframing. That is such an
reframe has probably
strategy.
been my absolute biggest go-to strategy.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering if this is what you mean in your book by demons and angels, because that is a term that you use in your book around certain things that are negative and positive, or people that are negative and positive in your life. Is this what you mean by those demons and angels? That what do you mean by those terms?
Yeah, so we'll start with demons. So for me, the demons are those things that can take away your positive, your positive energy, or take away your ability to tackle your uncertainty and assume some control. So everyone will have their own demons that trigger them in different ways. I was lucky; I didn't have any anger or bitterness over the incident. I didn't blame anyone. Yes, I think it was the effectively the road's fault, but it just happened. That was never going to be helping me to channel energy into that. I guess the ones I did really struggle with was probably a bit weaker, but confusion. I was very confused about how the accident had happened for a while, and I wasted a bit of energy on that the first 7 to 10 days of, how did, like, I can ride so well, I corner so well, how did the bike get out of control? As that cost me some energy. But my biggest three were fear. When you have to just deal with the fear of the situations, it can really suck energy out of you. And despair, I would have despairing moments quite consistently. I had to work my way through. Sometimes I could work through, sometimes interventions were really important. And guilt. So guilt was probably the biggest one. And again, another intervention by Lucy, positive intervention, so that wingman sort of effort. And sometimes you don't quite realise the extent of it. So it wasn't till, I think, 21 months after my accident, I'm sitting down with a friend who really didn't know much about it, and he's a school teacher. So I had my then 12 or 13-year-old boy with me, and he said, Charlie, what was it like for you in that first week? And Charlie said, well, he looks at me and goes, Dad, you were so depressed. You were constantly, or you were confused as to how the accident happened, and you were constantly apologising for letting us down. And I was definitely doing that. Like, whenever they weren't there, I was putting all my energy into recovering, because I didn't want to be this sort of, burden to my family. I was really proud of being, active with my family and supporting them in their interests, and I wanted to travel the world and all these other things, in the future. And I didn't want to have that taken away from me. I couldn't control whether or not it was taken away from me, but I could give myself the best chance of limiting how much it had been, it was going to slip away. So I put all my energy into that. But Lucy, I think she probably pretty fed up of this by about day 4 or 5, and she's turned up at hospital with one of those I'm sorry buttons from Officeworks, or wherever you buy them. You've got different things, there's a yes button and a no button, and she got the I'm sorry one, and she turned up and she gave me this I'm sorry button. And I think I always sort of joke, maybe so that I could understand just how bad I sounded every time I said I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So again, sometimes you need someone else's help to give you that trigger to how do you reframe it. So that then gave me that gave me a mental cue all the time. Every time I started to go down that path of feeling guilt around my situation, well, I can't control that anymore. Yeah. That's gone. All I can control is how I move forward from here. Yeah.
So I love that, and I love the idea that there are these feelings that are really they can take control of our attitudes and our responses to things. And you've described 3 really maybe common ones. And we all need to acknowledge that, these are just very real feelings for us, especially when it's us, It's all very well when we're looking at someone else and saying, don't worry, don't feel guilty. It's not your fault. It's very easy when it's not you. But when it's you feeling that, it can be overwhelming. So your angels then are those strategies and things and people that have helped you overcome and reframe, as you say, or to have a different strategy to those demons. And really, I like the one that you mentioned earlier. It was gratitude. So what can I be grateful for, even though there are things that could concern me and worry me, but what could I be grateful for? And I've for a long time loved the concept of gratitude diaries, or constantly when I sit down with dinner with the kids, most nights I try and remember to say, so what are we grateful for today? It's just a really good habit to get into, I think, think, when you know that there are so many things that you could be worried or blaming people for, blame and anger. We do have a lot of that going on at the moment, and it's easy to kind of catch those emotions from others when people are feeling angry, and to make sure that you don't get sucked into some of that blame and anger sometimes. Okay, look, time is going so quickly, Mark, and I really want to get to, again, a couple more questions around us as leaders. And, you know, we work with teams and colleagues and friends and family who might also be feeling uncertain. And you've talked about your wingman and Lucy's ability to support you and help you reframe, etc. But what are some things that you've seen now? You're well on your road to recovery, but you've got all this career, this very good corporate career experience as well. What can we learn as leaders and as colleagues in workplaces where people are feeling very uncertain? What tips would you give to us in regards to how we work with people at work?
Yeah, well, I think for me, the real threshold issue is the willingness to seek help and disclose a problem, right? And the reason why we often don't do that is because we have, sometimes we don't recognize we've got a problem. We don't see where the available help is for that problem. We're struggling to articulate our issue, and certainly that's true, of me now, even, different stages of my rehabilitation journey as I'm trying to learn how to use different muscles because my sensory feedback's not the same as it used to be. It's a real challenge to try and articulate to and from the physios of what they want me to feel and what I am feeling. And so to me, in a workplace sense, is how do we set up that environment where people feel much more comfortable that there is available help. So obviously we have EAPs, that's very, very important in that. But more than that, how do we show as leaders that we're vulnerable, that set the example that there is, that you get through things, that you can reach out and help, that help is available there. What are those strategies we use for reaching out? And I think it did help me in my journey that I'd had some anxiety issues in the early 2000s, the point in time where our kids were young. You've got a mortgage, you're thinking about, is my career going where I wanted it to go? Am I meeting the expectations I put on myself? So how do you understand those triggers? But am I meeting them? And so having some simple CBT strategies that I had myself helped me. But how do you get that sort of mental literacy of understanding a few strategies of going, right, I'm getting these thoughts out of perspective. How do I change what I do, or how do I just break up? So one of my really good strategies has always been just putting effort into some sort of rehab. So I'm feeling down about where I'm at. Well, okay, what can I control? Go back to that. Go back to something simple. Do 10 minutes of it. Break the cycle of feeling sad. So I guess that's what individuals can do, but in a workplace environment, I think it's very much about how do we actually make it feel, I guess, more, the more people have got these problems, basically. I was trying to say more normal, but I actually hated using the word. That's why I paused. But how do we make it feel safe and understand that people realise that there are strategies and people get through it? Because without that, then people aren't willing to disclose problems and seek help. And that's, I think, the fundamental problem. I think probably one of the real benefits of COVID eventually will be that we're going to be a much more flexible workforce. And I think that's a really good thing in many jobs. And some don't have that privilege, of course. But, that means as an individual as well, and leaders supporting that individual, we can say, I am going to work from home today. I feel a bit like I'm just out of control with my, tough balance of young kids and homeschooling and sick dog and all the rest of it. And all these pressures are building up on the work pressure. Hang on, I'm just going to work from home and I'm going to take time out to deal with these issues. And I think ultimately that ability to realise that there's a problem and take some form of control, and then workplaces then support that with adequate flexibility and support help. Sorry, long answer.
Yeah, no, I'm liking it, and I'm just summarising here. Hopefully, it's about role modelling. that we as leaders and as colleagues can role model talking about how we're feeling and sharing with others so that they feel more able to talk to us and be honest with us about how they're feeling. And then it's using strategies or encouraging people to use good strategies. And Heather was asking, is mindfulness one of those strategies? And I believe it is, that when we're able to encourage those types of mentally healthy and those strategies that help our mental health first and foremost, it does encourage a culture where people are able to talk more about how they're feeling and then support each other. And I just wanted to get in one more question around this whole lanterns thing, because some people might be wondering, well, hang on, I think I heard him talk about demons, angels, and lanterns. And I'm wondering, is this what you mean by lanterns? The way that the kind of concept of what are the things that can help us and promote us to keep moving forward as an individual, but as a team or as an organization, because I think more than ever we are recognizing that we need healthy workplaces. I've also put on the slide here being trauma informed, because when people have gone through serious mental health issues, it doesn't have to be a physical accident. I mean, you've had physical injuries, which sometimes makes it perhaps a little bit easier to recognize that you're going through recovery. But with mental health, it's not always easy to see that, and people can hide that really well sometimes. So but people are still on a journey of recovery if they've been through some traumatic event or a mental breakdown or whatever it might be that they're recovering from. So we talk a lot about being trauma informed with our clients and our service users and people who we're working with, but I think probably we can learn a lot from that in terms of our own internal workplace. So very quickly, Mark, what are lanterns?
Yeah, so
please
I guess,
help me here.
At its broadest level, I think about lanterns as being sort of that pathway to possibility. So how do you identify what might be possible, and what are the lanterns that help you get there? And to me, that's about the embers of your identity. So how do you really connect back to what's important to you? Because if you connect back to what's really important to you, then you can start to control your effort and attitude around protecting that. And I think you're just effectively simplifying it down to what's really important to you, and how do I set up my my recovery framework around that, whether it be mental or physical. I talk about in the lanterns as well, that ability to find your brave face. So sometimes you just need to find the brave face that gets you through the moment, so you're not doing more damage to yourself. And then that more importantly, the brave face is the courage to speak out and find that help when you need it. I guess it's the ability to be curious and to explore pathways. So, because what often happens, and it certainly happened for me at different stages, is you've got these, the demons, the fears and other things, and the uncertainty, and it makes you want to go back to comfort. And that's often the wrong thing to do. And certainly one of our hospital transitions, I absolutely, if I was left to my own devices, would have made a more comfortable choice, which would have proved to be the wrong choice. And so how do you then, I guess, have the help around you reach out for the right advice and trust it in order to, effectively have a soft intervention to move you towards that better possibility. And I guess there's some other things within lanterns.
Yeah, great. Andrew has recommended Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead, and I also agree with that, Andrew. That's a fantastic book, and Brené can teach us a lot about the importance of being vulnerable sometimes and really sharing, the things that do worry us or make us anxious. But I really like the whole concept of always having goals and hopes and dreams, not to the point where it's kind of like you can never reach them, but little steps, little things that you can do. And I'll give you an example. My parents my mum lives in England, and I can't see her at the moment, but I can give her a call, or I can do a Zoom, and I can catch up with her, at the weekend. And so it's really just trying to find those little steps and goals that you can achieve, and saying, you know, one day I'd love to go back to England and give her a hug, but right now it's all about just trying to do the things that I can do. And so, look, I really love everybody sharing in the chat, but is there any questions that anybody would like to ask Mark? I feel like I've asked him a lot of questions this morning.
Can I just say very quickly, I saw something pop up from, was it Bernadette, about this, saying thank you around the soft interventions, and that really touched me when I saw that pop up, because in a chapter of my book, with chapter 6, which I'm calling Reaching In and Reaching Out, which is really, or Reaching Out and In, which is about the ability to reach out to the angels that are helping you, but also reach inside yourself for memories and inspiration. I tried to write about this soft interventions and it didn't work. So it's currently parked in, as I do, this file that's called crap from chapter 6 I didn't use. So you've inspired me, but there's some hope, and I've got to come back and find a way to get that interventions concept working. And at the moment in my mind, it's sitting somewhere in demons, actually, as a method of dealing with demons. So it's actually nice to have this opportunity to see feedback come back like that, and I get a feel for, maybe there is more, even though I wasted a whole weekend trying to find the merit in this, maybe there is merit there. So thank you, Bernadette. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Any other questions for Mark? Has this been helpful today to just hear Mark's story? And Mark, you're still on that road to recovery, aren't you? I mean,
I do 4 hours of rehab a week. I'll never fully recover. Well, who knows, right? I don't actually know that. Basically, when you get a spinal cord injury, they tell you they never know how long you're going to recover for. Probably no chance of any recovery after the 2-year mark, but only by looking backwards. And sometimes people don't recover anymore after the first 6 months. So who knows, right? So you're getting all this different opinions all through the process. And but in my mind, I'm still recovering and I'm still pursuing recovery.
So question from Peter. Peter, would love a question.
Thanks, Ruth. Mark, thanks very much. Can you hear me there?
Thanks, Scotty.
Yep.
Lovely to see you.
It's quite loud in my ears. I can hear myself. Mark, I'm just wondering if the whole experience has changed your expectation of certainty. Do you have a higher, lower expectation of certainty in your life moving forward now?
I think my work environment really helped me, and I had to deal with a lot of ambiguity, I think, in work. So I think it makes me appreciate, when things are going well, better, and what we can, the great things in life, the time with my family, all the good things I was able to do in the past, and I can, finding ways to do now. So I think it makes me more appreciate, as opposed to feeling like I'm going to, I could easily, whatever the next uncertainty is, I don't want it, probably. So I'm not looking forward to some further step change in uncertainty should it happen to me. But perhaps I feel like, I think it's one of the benefits of, this happening to me when I was nearly 50 years. I had a lot of accumulated experience of ambiguity and uncertainty to deal with, and now I've got even more. So I think in some ways I'd feel like, even more than now I can deal with crap. And again, I know we've talked about angels a bit, Ruth, and that was to me part of that whole angels is, how do I find memories and inspiration of people and other things that have done it tougher than me, and how do I sort of latch onto that and say, well, they could achieve from much worse positions than me. Okay, I don't know what I can achieve or can't achieve, but I can mirror their attitude. What was the attitude? What did they do? Well, I don't actually know what they did, right? How do I imagine they might have behaved to achieve what they achieved? And how do I apply myself in a way that I imagine that they might have applied themselves? That's really what I did.
And you do share some stories in your book, but I think we just need to all turn on the telly over the next week or so and watch those Paralympians. I just watched a little bit last night, and I was showing my kids and going, look at these guys, what are they doing? Like, they're incredible. So inspiring to see them do Olympics, with some of their disabilities. And I think that, it's very good to look at people who can inspire you and encourage you through just watching them. And we don't know who's watching us. You know, we don't know who's being inspired by us sometimes, in those small ways, or when we share how we're feeling and how the strategies that are helping us.
Well,
look, thanks so much, Mark. Donna just did say, are you going to get on a bike anytime soon?
Well, I did ride on the fat tyres a few times early last year. At the very start, it was absolutely important for me to get back on the bike. It was part of my mental rehab. I wanted to get back on the bike. I got back on the mountain bike a few times early part of last year, and it felt more normal than walking, so it was nice. But yeah, there's not a lot of support in my house for me to get back on the road
No.
bike and cycling significantly. Let's describe it that way. Not a lot of support.
Great. Well, thanks, everybody. And we do look forward to your book coming out soon, Mark. I think it's going to be a very inspirational read and something that is going to help us in our lives and at work as well. So keep your eyes open. Definitely connect with Mark on LinkedIn, because he will share how and when to get hold of that book, and that will be fantastic. Thanks, Mark, for joining us today. Folks, just before you go to your day today, we are now going to put Fridays, the last few Friday months that are in this year, we're going to make tea and buns on a Friday, and I've got some great speakers, other speakers lined up for the rest of the year. So please keep an eye on your emails. I'll let you know all about that soon. Thank you for joining us. Thank you again, Mark. I hope today has been valuable. I hope that you can have a think about your own strategies of dealing with uncertainty, and look at your circle of control and make sure that you're focused on, you know, enlarging, what did he say? Magnifying your positivity through focusing on what you can control. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Have a fantastic day. Good to see you all. Hope to see you next time.